Shabbat Shalom. We want to welcome every one of you that has joined us here in our Olive Tree Fellowship Teaching Center here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I want to welcome those of you that are coming in through our YouTube channel. Blessings on each and every one of you that has given us some comments and did some likes on our thing and our program. And so we want to thank you. Today, we are going to continue. This is part 2 of Parasha Lech-Lecha. And this year, what we're doing is we're going on a verse-by-verse teaching. It's a 3-year study on the Torah. It's going to take us about 3.5 years to go through the whole Torah, pretty much verse by verse. And so we want to thank each and every one of you. The Lech-Lecha means go forth for yourself. And it's chapter 12 of Genesis to 17:27. And last week we did part 1, part 2 today, and if we don't finish part 2, we'll go to a part 3 next week. And so I'm trying to I said this year we're going to go slower. But even going slower, there's so much that we still need to do. So we are in chapter 14, verse 1, and it's the capture of Lot. It's called the campaign of the 4 kings of the east, kings of Mesopotamia that came in to the Jordan Valley where Lot was living, and they came, and of course in those days people paid tribute, and so they had to pay taxes to these kings, and they stopped paying the taxes, and so the kings came to make sure that they oppressed them again and took their taxes. Well, as they took captives and captured items from the kings in the Jordan Valley, which the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah and those kings, remember Lot was living there with them, and they took him captive. Well, when Abram, and remember his name is Abram, exalted father. Abram means exalted father. And again, he was a very important, what we would call today a sheik. He was a very important person there in the land as he had come in. Remember, he was an outsider. He was from the other side of the river. He was from Ur, and he came in as a Hebrew. Remember, the word Hebrew means river crosser. He came in del otro lado, from the other side, and came to Canaan land. But when he was in Canaan land, he grew in numbers and he grew in finances, and so he became a very important person. And so when his nephew Lot was captured, Abram went and goes to rescue Lot. And he goes up north as the map shows, and goes and fights and brings back Lot and some of the other captives, but he captures a lot of the treasures that these 4 kings had taken. And he brings them back to Canaan, and he brings them back to where he is living in Hebron. And on the way between the river, there in the Jordan Valley, going up the mountain is where Jerusalem is today, and from there you go south to Hebron. Well, at that time, and this is one of the part of the story of Melchizedek. This is part of the story as to who he is. Now, that land, that place we call Jerusalem today, was a Canaanite city called Jebus. Jebus, a foundation. And one of the things that we know is that this man, Melchizedek, was a priest and a king here in this city of Salem. Now, Salem, Jebus, and Jerusalem is the same place. And so it's interesting that where is this place? Watch what 14:18 says. Melchizedek, or Melchizedek, was king of Salem. The word Salem is the same root system, SLM, and remember in Hebrew, we do consonants only. The vowels are in our mind, and when you change vowels in between the consonants, it changes different aspects of the word. So the word Salem is the same root system as shalom, which means peace. Interestingly enough, I remember I was in Japan, and over there they had peace cigarettes. The names of the cigarettes were called Peace. Well, remember here in the States, what was the name of the cigarettes? Salem cigarettes. And that's interesting in that they used the actual word peace for Salem. And it's interesting that this man, Melchizedek, brought bread and wine. He was also, it says, a Cohen, a priest of El Elyon. El Elyon means Elohim Most High, or in King James speak, Most High God. And so he was a priest of El Elyon. Well, here's where the problem starts. Here's where we need to dig deeper. Because remember, this is Canaan. There was no worshipers of El Elyon in Canaan. They were worshipers of all these idols. They were idol worshipers. And they were even involved in child sacrifice and all these other things. Well, what is this man? What is this person? This king. He's king of Salem, which again is Jerusalem today. But in between, before, in the time before Abraham, and later on, and especially in the time of David, it's called Jebus. Again, a Jebusite, a Canaanite city. Who was this man? Where did he come from? And why did he bring bread and wine? Well, definitely bread and wine in the ancient world were the staples of fellowship, of what we would call communion. In Greek, the word communion is koinonia, and it means having commonness, having a common time. When we fellowship, koinonia, when we have koinonia, we have a common time. Last night we had an oneg. The word oneg means to delight. And an oneg in a congregational setting is what has been called, what was the word that they used to use for eating together? Well, eating together. It's a time of eating together where we come and eat together. I know Christianity has a word for it, but I can't remember the word that they use for it. Potluck. Remember potluck? That's what they use. Oneg is a potluck, or if you're a little more spiritual, pot blessing. But last night we had our new moon. Last night the new moon showed up, and we had our new moon communion, our new moon fellowship, our new moon koinonia. And so we fellowshipped. We had a good time. We had a lot of food. And we had a really good time last night. And we got the bread. And we got the cup. And we did the blessing. And again, to this day, what Melchizedek did, what we do on Passover, what we do on the agape meals, as they were called in the New Testament, and what is done in Catholic churches, Protestant churches, almost every church is in their masses and Eucharist, or I don't know, some of them I think call them the Lord's table or something like that. It's the same blessing, and it's the same thing with bread and wine. Bread, of course, has been called the staff of life. And bread has always been used, we call it breaking bread. Let's break bread. And when you have fellowship with people, even, an anniversary, a birthday, it's always revolves around food. But bread and wine are what opens up a meal. Bread and wine are what opens up a meal. Even if they would have had a big meal, bread and wine will open it up, because when you break bread, in those days they didn't cut it, and today we don't cut the challah, we just grab a portion of it. And when you break bread, it's one loaf, Paul says, about the Passover bread. It's one loaf, and we all share in that one loaf. So when we eat of the one bread, whether it's the unleavened bread of Passover or the leavened bread of the oneg and the agape meals, it symbolizes fellowship. It symbolizes koinonia, commonness. We are one. And when we partake of the cup, of course, in this time, it's the word yayin, lechem va yayin. And when I was reading the Torah portion, I emphasized that twice. Lechem va yayin, bread and yayin. Now the word yayin is alcoholic wine. It's not grape juice. Grape juice wasn't invented really until the 1800s. They didn't have grape juice. And they had what they called new wine or glucose, which was when they just broke the grapes and newly harvest, and then they could drink that. But again, it would always ferment. And so this is always a symbol. Wine is a symbol. Alcoholic wine is a symbol of joy. Of course, Adonai condemns drunkenness, and drunkenness is always negative in the scriptures. But the use of wine as a communion, as a getting a piece of bread and a cup of wine, was a sign of communion and fellowship and joy and being together. And he was a priest. He was a Cohen. But look at this. He wasn't a Cohen. He wasn't a priest of the pagan. It says that he was a priest of the Creator. He pronounced this blessing on Abraham. By Elohim Most High, Creator of heaven and earth. This man, Melchizedek, was a priest, and in those days, up until the golden calf, the firstborn son in the Hebrew and in other cultures, the firstborn son was always considered the priest of the family, and he would become the patriarch of the family and of those within the family that did not have a firstborn son. And so he became like a patriarch, And the firstborn son was always a Cohen. Up until the golden calf incident, which we're going to look at. And at that point, Adonai selected Levi and Aaron to be the priests, the sons of Aaron, the priests, and the other sons of Levi to be the, what we would call deacons today, the servants of the priests and the servants of the altar, the servants of the temple. But this man, Melchizedek, he pronounces a blessing, and he is a priest of El Elyon, of Yahweh. He's a priest of Yahweh. By the way, that name El Elyon also figures in the Annunciation of Gabriel to Mary, where Gabriel announces that Mary was going to have a son, call him Yeshua, and it says, and he will be called the son of El Elyon, of Elohim Most High. Blessed be Abram by Elohim, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be Elohim Most High for putting your enemies into your clutches. Well, when Abraham went north and in pursuit of the four kings, it wasn't because of his might. It wasn't because he had a big army, which he didn't have a big army. He just had his servants. He had the people around him, those that worked for him. His shepherd. Remember, he was a shepherd. But it was Adonai who put his enemies into his clutches, into his hands. And it was Adonai who gave to Abraham the riches and the treasures that he captured from this four kings. So Adonai is to be praised over here. One of the things we know about Abraham is this, because he was a Torah keeper, by the way. Abraham, and I think it's next week we're going to look at that. I'm a little bit ahead. But Abraham, it says, kept my Torah. So he was a Torah keeper. You say, well, wait a second. How could Abraham keep Torah when the Torah wasn't given until the time of Moses later on? Because the Torah was written by Moses, but the Torah, which doesn't mean the law, that's a mistranslation. The word Torah is from the word yara, which means to throw out or to teach. So the word Torah actually means the teachings, which Bereshit 1:1, Genesis 1:1, begins the teachings of creation, the teachings of marriage there in 1:28, the teaching about the Sabbath, all the teachings about, in fact, the teachings about sacrifices. How did Cain and Abel know about sacrifice? Adonai must have, in the cool of the day when he walked with Adam, must have taught him about sacrifice, and Adam taught his sons, and his sons practiced it. The first murder happened because Adonai was pleased with the first fruits of Abel, but he wasn't pleased with the sum of the first fruits of Cain. And so we have that. How did Noah know about clean and unclean? The Torah says, do not eat unclean meats. How did Noah know? And says, you will take one couple, a pair of the unclean, but 7 pairs of the clean. And how did Noah know that at the end of the flood, that when he sacrificed, it says he sacrificed of the clean animals only? How did he know that you only sacrifice clean? And later on, about the Sabbath and all these other things that Moses writes down, but the Torah begins in Genesis 1:1. And Abraham gave him a tithe of everything. A tithe is a 10%. How did Abraham know that the first fruit, and this is a tithe, is called a first fruit? You give 10% at the first. And then the 90% is yours. You could do whatever with the 90%. But the first tenth, the first fruit of the field, belongs to Adonai. The first fruit of the animal, the firstborn of the animal, which is considered the first fruit, that belongs to Adonai. How did they know this? How did Abraham know this? Because we are told Abraham kept the Torah, the instructions, the teaching that they've been receiving since the time of Adam, through Cain and Abel, through Seth, through Eber, through Noah, through Shem, through Eber again, and all these men that Adonai has given us, all our ancestors. And he tithed unto him. Later on, we're going to see that Jacob gives 10% to Adonai. 10% is not a Mosaic law, rabbinical law, or church law. And again, always remember, Adonai always blesses the 10th, but it's always voluntary. Giving to Adonai is always voluntary. You do not have a duty to give to him. It's always voluntary. This was voluntary. Melchizedek then said, okay, I blessed you. Now you give me, there's $1,000 there. No, it's nothing like that. Like today, some of these people, they'll pray for you and then ask you for a donation. No, this came out of Abraham's heart of knowing the word, knowing everything from, think of it, from Adam to himself. He knew the story of blessings and cursings. He knew when you follow Adonai, you will be blessed. But if you do not follow Adonai, curses. In fact, he knows about the flood. He knows about that judgment that Adonai did, because the world had become Hamas. The world had become violent. And so he gave him a tithe. And always remember, tithing is voluntary. Over here, we don't know who gives and who doesn't. I don't know who gives. We actually have an outside person that does the counting, an outside firm that does the counting, and I don't know what comes in or what comes out, except that the annual meeting says this is where everything came in, this is what we spent, and what went out, and reconcile those, and then we have people that will go back and re-audit the things. And so tithing is voluntary, but always remember, Adonai blesses the tithe, and if you don't tithe, then that's between you and him. Go with me to Psalm 110, and we're going to spend a little time here. And again, I'm not just going to mention last year when we went through this, we just mentioned it, but this year I'm going to kind of go through Psalm 110, because it's important. In King James speak, and almost any, even the Jewish English translations say, the Lord said to my Lord. The Lord said to my Lord. Well, that's not what the Hebrew says. And it's important that we read what the Hebrew says. And what the Hebrew says is Yahweh declared to my Adonai. Of course, Yahweh is the covenant name of Chai Elohut, of the Creator. That's his covenant name, means I am that I am. He declared to my Adonai. Adonai is a plural noun, meaning my sovereigns, plural. My lords, it's in plural. Like the word Elohim, which is translated God singular in English, in Hebrew, it's actually God's plural. But because it's used with singular pronouns and singular verbs, he, singular pronoun, said, singular verb, Elohim. Elohim, he said. Gods, he said. Of course, that in English doesn't make sense, but in Hebrew it makes all the sense. Because in Hebrew you see the plurality and the singularity, the unity of Adonai. And so over here, Yahweh declared to my master, to my sovereign, take your seat at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. Who's he talking to? Who is Yahweh talking to? Yahweh is talking to Adonai. Who's Adonai? Adonai is Yahweh and Adonai is Elohim. So Yahweh is talking not to himself, but Yahweh is talking, what we would say here, to the second person, which later on is going to be known as Yeshua the Messiah. But over here, watch what he says. Take your seat till I make your enemies your footstool. Well, when did this happen? This happened when Yeshua ascended and took his place at the right hand of majesty. So here Yahweh is declaring to the Master, the sovereign Yeshua, the pre-incarnate Yeshua, a prophetic view of Yeshua, sit down, take your seat here at my right hand until I have made your enemies your footstool. And Adonai even now is making the enemies the footstool. And during tribulation times, he's going to put his foot down. And then during the millennial kingdom, Messiah, King Messiah, Adonai Yeshua is going to have complete rulership, not over Israel, a renewed Israel, but over all the nations of the world. And the whole world is going to have the knowledge of Yahweh. In fact, during the millennium, all the Gentile nations will be under Torah. All the Gentile nations, not just the Jews, not just Israel, and the tribe of Judah or any of the tribes, but all Kol Goyim are going to come and have to go to Jerusalem for the holy days, for the feast that even today, even Christian nations are pushing, that's for the Jews, that's not for us. No, there will be a time when he will rule with that rod of iron, and all nations will be in Jerusalem. Yahweh will stretch out the scepter of power. The scepter is the golden rod that a king uses to either bless or to bring judgment and curse any of his enemies. From Sion, and Sion is what we call the city of David today. In fact, all kinds of archaeological work is being done in Sion. It's from south of the Temple Mount to where the Kidron Valley and the Hinnom Valley meet there by Hezekiah's tunnel and this area right there, which, by the way, right there by Hezekiah's tunnel, where those of you that have been in, where you go in, that's the valley of Sheva. That is where Salem, the original Salem, that's where Melchizedek's throne was, right there at that meeting place. And it's a beautiful valley right there. Sion, you will rule your foes all around you. Royal dignity has been yours from the day of your birth. From the day of your what? Your birth. It's talking about Yeshua. Sacred honor from the womb. From the dawn of your youth, Yahweh has sworn an oath he will never retract. Never retract. You know, a lot of times people, we retract things that Adonai has said. Sabbath is forever. Who had the authority to retract it? Who had the authority to bring Sunday instead of the Sabbath? No place in the New Testament are we told that Sunday is the new day. Can you meet on Sunday? Of course. Can you meet on Wednesday? Of course. The Sabbath has never been retracted. This has never been retracted. You, Adonai here, the one who has taken his seat at the right hand of majesty, the one who was born, the one who was in the womb of Mary, is a Cohen, a priest forever of the order of Melchizedek. Now, this is a Psalm of David. This is after Moses. In the time of David, there was a Levitical priesthood. There was an Aaronic priesthood. The sons of Aaron were the priests. The sons of Levi were the servants. That system was going on. That was part of Torah. That was part of what we call the Mishpatim. The word Mishpatim in Hebrew are decrees and or laws. Within the teaching, within Torah, there's Mishpatim, Chukim, Mitzvot, commandments, decrees. Sometimes if you read Psalms 119, it says your decrees, your statutes, your judgments. These are all different words that are not synonymous with Torah, with the law, as King James Speak uses, but they are part. And so, just like our Constitution, under our Constitution, we have all kinds of laws that have to do with red lights and stop signs and stuff like that. You are a priest of the order of Melchizedek. Why does David bring this idea of Adonai? He calls him Adonai. Yahweh declared to my Adonai, my sovereign, my master. Who is David's master? A man who's going to be a priest forever under the order of Melchizedek. What did David know about Melchizedek? What did he know? What we know from what we read is very small. All we know is that he was a priest of El Elyon. All we know is that after the battle, as Abraham is coming through Salem, passing through Salem, which is at the bottom of the hill there, the city of David today, and as he's going up the hill, by the way, going up that hill, he'd be passing through the Temple Mount, what is the Temple Mount today, and then going south to Hebron, through Beit Lechem right there. You could actually go through that road today. And so one of the things that we have here is that what did David know about the Levitical priesthood. And what did he know about this man, Melchizedek? What order, what division did Melchizedek have? Did Melech have a set of priests? We don't know that. Did he have his own convent? We don't know that. Did he have his own group of prophets? We don't know that. We don't know nothing about him. All we know is that he was a priest of El Elyon and he was a king of Salem. That's all we know. And we're going to learn a little bit more. At your right hand, Adonai, he shatters kings when his anger breaks out. Whoa, look at this. At your right hand, Adonai, wait a second. Yahweh declares to Adonai. Yahweh says to Adonai, take your seat until I make your enemies your footstool. Now, this one who's Adonai is going to be a priest forever, like Melchizedek. At your right hand, Adonai, he shatters kings. Well, wait a second. Yahweh now is called Adonai, but this other one was called Adonai. That's why Yeshua says later on in the gospel, I and the Father are echad. We are one. There's a oneness, an echadness between the Father and the Son, between Adonai here and Adonai. When his anger breaks out, he judges nations. He judges the Gentiles. The word nations there is the word goyim, Gentiles. Heaping up corpse. He breaks heads over the whole wide world. He drinks from a stream as he goes, and therefore he holds his head. This is the words of a victor. He breaks people's heads, boom, over the whole wide world. These are phrases that have to do with someone who is a warrior, a king. And in Psalms 119, this Adonai, this priest, has a forever order. A forever order. And we'll look at this again. Who is Melchizedek? I don't know. There's some people this I do know he is not. I know who he is not. Melchizedek is not Shem. Melchizedek is not Shem. If you study about Melchizedek, one of the things that especially Rabbinic Judaism tells you is that he is Shem. And the only reason that they say he is Shem is because they fiddled around with the translation from the Hebrew, original Hebrew, to fit the modern Jewish Masoretic texts and translations. And the reason they did that is because they knew this is post-apostolic, post-Yeshua, and they knew the connection between Melchizedek, as we're going to see in the book of Hebrews now, and Yeshua. And they didn't want that connection because that connection, as we're going to see, is of vital importance. And so what they did is they shaved 100 years, 100 years, 100 years from several of the men, several of the patriarchs between Shem and Abram to make sure that Shem lived to the time of Abraham. Shem did not live to the time of Abraham. Shem is not Melchizedek. But besides that, I don't know who he is. Was he a king at the time. But wait a second, a king of Salem that is not Canaanite? That Abraham had already passed through there, unknown to him? I don't know. Or was he the pre-incarnate Messiah, Yeshua? Hebrews 7:1. By interpretation of his name, he is first king of righteousness. Melech is the Hebrew word for king. Melech is Malchut, is a kingdom. Melech is a king. Zedek is the word for righteous. Zedekiah, Yah is righteous. Zedek, Tzedakah, means righteousness. Tzedakah is the Hebrew word for someone being a righteous person. So Melchizedek, his name means king of righteousness. Now, putting that, and again, knowing what you know now, who is the king of righteousness? Yeshua is his name. Yeshua is the king of righteousness. And so this Melchizedek has the same name that we attribute to Yeshua in his kingdom and in his righteousness. And also king of Salem. He was king of peace. In fact, Isaiah calls Messiah Shar Shalom, the Prince of Peace. Over here, Melech Shalom. He was the king of Salem, this town, this little village at the southern end, at the bottom of what we call today the city of David. He has no father, mother, or ancestry. Now, the writer to the Hebrews says this. Where did the writer to the Hebrews know this? Where did he understand this? How does he know this? Well, we know it because it doesn't say he's the son of so-and-so or these are his children. But notice that there are many, in fact, most people that are introduced in Scripture, it doesn't say they're the son of so-and-so or they are the father of so-and-so. And so one of the things we know that this isn't something that is odd. He has no father, no mother, no ancestry. He has no genealogy. He has no toldot. Remember, toldot is ancestry. He has no genealogy. And his life has no beginning and no ending. How did the writer to the Hebrews know that he had no beginning, no ending? Now, when someone has a beginning and an ending, every one of us had a beginning. The moment you were conceived, the moment you were born, you've lived your life, and at one point in time, we're all going to go. Everyone, my mother, my father, had a beginning, had an ending. Everyone has a beginning and an ending. But this Melchizedek, think about it. He didn't have no beginning, no ending. That means eternal. This is an eternal one. This is someone, olam ha'olam in Hebrew. He is like the son of Elohim. Well, wait a second. The only son of Elohim that the book of Hebrews knows, son of Elohim, is Yeshua. He's pointing to Yeshua. Because Yeshua is not only the son of man, Ben Adam, but he's also Ben Elohim, which is what the angel told Mary also. He will be called the son of Elohim because he will have the throne of David, but will come forth the shadow of El Elyon will overshadow you. So he will be called Ben Elohim. He remains a priest forever. Now Yeshua, and again, most of us were talking from hindsight here, is a priest forever. Now, remember when we talk about forever, forever from creation to the end of the millennium is forever. But at the end of the millennium, when we transfer into eternity, that is another olam haolam. That is a forever and ever, and that one is eternal. The forever that we're living on now has its limits. We are in the box of time. Every one of us lives in the box of time. We live in a time-space continuum. And outside the box is eternity. Well, from the time of Adam, every time you hear the word forever, 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 it's until the end of the box. When the box ends, the inside the box forever ends, and then we begin the eternal. This is the temporal forever, and then we begin the eternal forever, and that one, because it's eternal, the box isn't eternal. Outside the box, the new heaven, new earth, the new Jerusalem, and I hate to disappoint some people, but we're not going to live in heaven forever, or we're not going to live in heaven for eternity. We're not going over there. We're not going to heaven. At the end of the millennium, a new heaven, new earth is formed, and it says there, the new Jerusalem comes down, and then the throne of Elohim, which is in heaven now, is going to come down to the new earth, and Elohim is going to live in the new earth. We're not going to him for eternity. He's coming down to us for eternity, and he's going to live among us in a new Gan Eden, a new Garden of Eden. Because remember, Adonai made the Garden of Eden, and he would come down and fellowship with man until man sinned. Well, now we revert back to that time, and in the eternity, the new heaven, new earth, the new Jerusalem, Elohim is going to live with us in the new Jerusalem. And at that point, there is a whole different world. That will be a real new world order. A new world, a new earth, streets of gold, and everything you read at the end of Revelation. One of the things that if we won't go through this today, and again, this is where we could spend, if you go with me to the book of Hebrews, one of the things that in the book of Hebrews, there's so much in Hebrews of Melchizedek. So my homework for you is to look at the book of Hebrews, chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7, and study about Melchizedek. And if you have any questions, join us on Wednesday night. We're studying the book of Matthew on Wednesday nights, but we always leave it open before for any questions that anybody might have. And if you have any questions about Melchizedek, please bring them on Wednesday night, and we will continue studying. Let's go to chapter 15 now. And we'll probably just start with chapter 15 of Genesis, and probably won't be able to finish the whole chapter, but we will continue. Where we leave off, we will continue next week. It says there, in 15:1, it happened sometime later that the word of Yahweh was spoken to Abram in a vision. Fear, have no fear, Abram. I am your Magen. I am your shield. Your reward will be very great. I am your Magen. By the way, the word Magen, everybody say Magen with me, Magen. The word Magen is a shield. Many people talk about the Star of David. There is no such thing as a Star of David. The symbol in the Israeli flag and the symbol of pendants and that people call a star in Hebrew is not a star. In Hebrew it's called Magen David. Magen David. In fact, an Israeli wine was called Magen David after the Magen David, what people call the Star of David. It is not a star, it is a shield. And here we talk about the shield of Abraham. I am your shield. I am your reward, and your reward is going to be very great. And then Abraham says, Adoni Yahweh. Of course, in Hebrew, it's Adonai and Yahweh. Now, in some English translations, because Yahweh is translated Lord also. Remember, every time the word Lord is in all capitals, Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh, Yahweh should be there. And if it's Lord, capital Lord, and O-R-D in smaller letters, then that's the word Adonai in Hebrew. So some translation says the Lord God because they can't say Lord, Lord. That's because they're not translating it right. This should say Adonai Yahweh. Abraham replied, what do you intend to give me? I go childless. Remember, Adonai promised him in chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. I am going to give you a seed. I'm going to give you a land. And you will be a blessing. We're continuing from last week. You will be a blessing. But I go childless. You promised me a son. I go childless. What do you intend? Then Abraham said, you have given me no seed. No seed. Some man of my household will be my heir. And then the word of Yahweh was spoken to him, and he said, your heir shall be your own flesh and blood. Then taking him outside, he said, look at the heaven and count the stars, if you can. Such will be your descendants. He told him, Abram put his faith in Yahweh, who counted it as making him justified. Okay, this, by the way, is the key to all salvation, to all redemption, to everything that has to do with us being the children of Elohim. Abraham put his trust, he put his faith, he put his everything on Adonai. I go childless, he's getting old. You're going to have seed. You're not only going to have a seed, singular, but you're going to have descendants, plural. Once he heard this promise, remember, this is a promise. This is an unconditional promise. Remember what we talked about last week? It is unconditional. His promises to Abraham are unconditional. There's no condition. The Mosaic covenant is conditional. If you do this, I'll do that. If you don't do that, I won't do that. That's conditional. There is no if here. Adonai promises him. The book of Galatians says that it comes through a promise, not through a law or a commandment. He put his trust. In other words, Abraham could rest. When you could rest, when Adonai promises you something, and all the promises are in the Word, and when you believe His Word, when you believe what is written here, everything about Yeshua, His birth, His death, His resurrection, His ascension, His coming back, when you trust the Word of Elohim and trust that this is true, let Elohim be true and every man a liar. At that point, Adonai will consider you justified. It says he put his trust, his faith in Yahweh, who counted this as making him righteous. Righteousness will never come by any work. There's no work keeping any law that will justify us. Justification, as we're going to see in Romans, is by faith and by faith alone. Adonai reaches his hand of grace to us, and it's always grace because we don't deserve it. He reaches his hand of grace, and we reach out our hand of faith, of trust. He's graceful to us, and we have trust. And when his hand of grace touches our hand of faith, that is justification. This happened to Abraham. That happened to Adam, by the way. We've seen it in Adam. And that happens to us. Let's stand. Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to be here. We thank you, Father, for Yeshua, who is our Melchizedek, our King of righteousness. To Yeshua, who is Melech Shalom, the Prince of Peace. To Yeshua, Father, who when we put our trust in him, our faith in Yeshua, the finished work of the cross, a sacrifice, tetelestai, he said, it is finished. We are justified by faith and not by works. Yeverechecha Yahweh va'ishmerecha. Air Yahweh panav elecha v'chunecha. Asa Yahweh panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day.
Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or torahunleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. Shalom, shalom y bienvenidos a Olive Tree y a la Torah Desatada. Les doy gracias a ustedes y a Adonai por su apoyo que nos han dado aquí. Y si quieren continuar a hacer una donación, pueden ir aquí en torahunleashed.org o en olivetreefellowship.com y ahí pueden dar una donación. Su apoyo, su ayuda es importante en estos días. Shalom, shalom.